it is my pleasure to welcome to the stage Sir David. And the rest of the panelists, please. Yes. Welcome, David. Sir David is almost as famous as Sir David Hattenberg. almost as famous as David. I have to give you a hint.
Sure.
I already prepared the audience that this is the rebels part, so this is where, you know, the fun will start even more, right? And I think you will have an issue because your panelists will change completely now the topic and they want to talk about quantum computing. How about that? How will you react with that?
Whatever they want to do. Whichever direction they lead me in, I will follow.
Really? Okay.
I find this interesting because yesterday I was called complex by one of your colleagues and today I'm a rebel as well, so...
Nice. Okay. Personally, I prefer the rebel. David,
I'm with
the
you.
rebel. Okay? So, hand over to you and I hope that you can still talk about the RIC at the Helm and how, you know, it's playing the importance in this ecosystem play. Just, you know, manage your panelists, I think. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Over to
Katerina.
you.
And thank you, everybody. It's great to be here to discuss what I think everybody agrees is a really important topic on the RIC. So many discussions that we've had today, and even in the last 2 days in the workshops that have been held here, are talking about the real innovation of Open RAN is going to come from the RAN intelligent controller. And I think that we'd all agree with that. And what it's going to take to happen to get this up and running is an ecosystem of various different players who are from network equipment manufacturers to RIC platform providers to test equipment manufacturers and the developer ecosystem itself to get this all up and running and working. And that vibrant ecosystem full of those different partners specializing in those different areas are going to need to have levels of interoperability, level of integration to be performed, and to enable that to be done, the accessibility to test environments and test beds, sandboxes, to deliver the development and testing of these applications is going to be extremely important. In addition to that, I mean, I think that we've all heard lots of discussions today. You've probably seen some xApps and RApps out there that are being displayed. So you may think that the RIC is ready to go, but there are still some challenges ahead, and I think that we want to discuss those today as well and see how we can overcome them as an ecosystem and how we can work together, particularly on maturity of the baseline specifications and what those look like. The integration with legacy systems is a point that we need to solve as well in order to make sure that the potential that we have with the RIC and the innovation that we can have on the Open RAN system doesn't go down the road of what we saw with SON in the past. So that's why I feel particularly lucky today to be surrounded by the experts who are going to be answering these questions for all of us. And I'm really happy to welcome you all onto the panel. I'm going to start off with just asking each one of you to give a little bit of an introduction about yourself and the role that your company is actually playing in the RIC ecosystem so that everybody kind of understands you know, which perspective that you're coming from. So please, Soma.
Okay. Thank you, David. And let me start with introducing myself. My name is Soma Sarkar. I head the Edge Cloud Platforms organization in Nokia's mobile networks. My organization is mainly responsible for all the Edge Cloud products, which includes the cloud hardware, the cloud software, the infrastructure, also the overall Cloud RAN solution, and also products like the front haul gateway and the RIC, what we are going to talk about today. Yeah, I'm very happy and excited to be here and getting to meet wonderful people. So indeed a great opportunity. And then coming to, you said, what's the role that Nokia plays? So maybe starting with Nokia's, Nokia and Open RAN. So I think Nokia was one of the first major vendor to be part of the Open RAN coalition. Nokia has been, if you look at the history, supportive of open and interoperable technologies. We've been working very closely with the operators and also all the other stakeholders in the ecosystem to shape the policies that would build or that is building the open wireless network. Coming specifically to the RIC ecosystem, I think first and foremost, we co-chair the working group 3 in the ORAN Alliance, where we are driving the specifications for the near real-time RIC and the E2 interface. Also, if you look at the platform, the near real-time RIC platform software, the code base has been co-created by Nokia. Also, we are working quite closely with the operators and the partners in validating many use cases with the xApps in the ecosystem, and also working with all the partners. And I think the i14y lab itself is a very great example of how we are collaborating with partners in the ecosystem, and I would say playing a key role in the overall open environment, I would say.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, and welcome. Timo, introduction, please.
Thank you, Sir David. Yeah, so my name is Timo Jokiaho. I'm Red Hat's Chief Technologist for EMEA Telco Media and Entertainment Organization. And we work very closely with most of the service providers in this region, of course, together with our partners, Nokia being one of those, to kind of encourage telco industry to go more and more for open source solutions on, not all the way. Of course, there has to be room for people's own software technology, but on the lower layers of the stack, which should be common to pretty much everybody. So we encourage industry to do that through our partners and directly with the service providers. And Open RAN or ORAN is one of the big opportunities for us as a software platform vendor and automation tool vendor. So what we do in ORAN context or Open RAN context is very simple. Some might say that it's even boring, because what we do, we provide open source software platforms, Kubernetes container platform mainly today, to host any workload in Open RAN, and of course 5G core as well, like DU, hosting DU with their specific features to be built into the platform, hosting CU, hosting RIC, which is a topic of this panel, and of course hosting SMO. We are just a platform vendor, which might sound boring, but of course it's the most sexiest thing in this world. But we do also provide automation tools, not the complete automation for the ORAN, but tools to build end-to-end automation, which has been one of the topics today, which is highly important topic. So open source software platforms, open source software tools, and some management tools. We do not have any applications for any purpose, not in telco, not in IT.
Okay, thank you, Timo, and welcome. Shamik, over to you.
Thanks, David. So I'm Shamik. I'm the CTO for our connectivity business in Capgemini Engineering. How does Capgemini actually fit in? We have two roles. We are an engineering services company as well, where we help those who want to build Open RAN systems. We help them to build those systems through our expertise and our investments in some software accelerators, as well as through engineering services. And then as a system integrator, we are working with leading operators worldwide in trying to design, deploy, test, validate the Open RAN ecosystem for them. Specific to RIC, it's a very important area for system integrators, primarily because as a system integrator moves into the ecosystem as more of a product integrator than just a system integrator, it needs more vertical knowledge on how to integrate the RIC with the SMO, with the CU, DU, and even right down to the cloud platform and the silicon itself. So as a product integrator, it's important for us to understand how we can create new applications and new use cases around Open RAN. Our energy saving project Post, which I spoke about in the morning, is one such example, and we are also driving development of several xApps together with the operator ecosystem. Apart from that, as a system integrator and a managed service provider, one of the key challenges for us is to ensure that the whole network is up and running continuously, and also we are able to monitor the network performance. And as Open RAN becomes more, as the RAN becomes more softwareized with virtualized and open ecosystem, it gives us an opportunity to figure out how we can automate network management at scale. And also how we can, collect information, data, how we can create small little digital twins across the network so that we can operate the network at scale and in a more efficient manner. Of course, that's easier said than done because it's still work in progress. And we believe that the RIC and the SMO ecosystem will provide us with those hooks for a system integrator who can then leverage those hooks to develop more resilient automation and monitoring systems for Open RAN. So both as an engineering entity, engineering product development entity, we are very interested in how to build Open RAN itself. But at the same time, as a system integrator, we see this as a major opportunity to drive efficiencies in the RAN deployment space. So that's roughly what we are.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that. And I guess that's probably answers what the question is for the killer app for the SMO and the RIC, is to make sure that the network is actually up and running.
Yeah, I believe so.
Great. Okay. So the RIC technology, as you can hear, there are many different players, there are many different layers to this. So I think ORAN Alliance have done a great job in building a new architecture related to this and the specifications around it. However, Soma, I wanted to ask you, as Nokia are leading one of the working groups related to this, what is the real maturity of the interface specifications with RIC, and how much work is there left to do to make sure that they're kind of fully open and fully interoperable?
Right. Very good question, David, because everything depends on the maturity of the specifications. So as I said, yes, Nokia, we are involved, or because we are co-chairing the working group 3, which is basically developing the specifications for the near real-time RIC and the E2 interface. I would say the latest version of the specification, which was released in March this year, 2023, that's the version 3, that's fairly mature. The maturity level would be quite good. When it comes to the RIC APIs, that I would say is still evolving. But we do hope that the APIs would get standardized, and that would then make it interoperable, the xApps to be interoperable. So that's something that we are hoping would happen eventually when the RIC APIs are maturing to that level. Besides that, I think from the solutions point of view, because you also asked how the solutions are, so I would say again the solutions are also evolving because it's a journey. So we have, based on the existing specifications, we have developed the solutions. We are working with multiple operators, and that's also giving us an opportunity to learn. So when we are working with the operators with the solutions, we are learning, and based on those learnings, we take back and we evolve the solution. So and similarly, not just with the operators, but also, for example, just using the i14y lab as an example, where we've been able to work with different partners who are bringing different xApps with which we are integrating our solution and seeing if there are interoperability challenges, how we can overcome that. So I would say pretty much it's working together with the ecosystem, the vendors, the operators, and the partners together to iron out what are the challenges and then how we can move ahead together. So that's pretty much what we are doing. Yeah.
And Timo and Shamik, you want to add anything to there from your perspective of platform providers and looking at it from the xApp RIC side of things? Are the standards there yet? Are you getting, from the application side of things or from the platform side of things, are you getting the right data sets that you need to be able to satisfy the use cases that you foresee?
So I agree all what Soma was saying, and pretty much the only thing I can add to this, maybe looking at the ORAN Alliance architecture, for example, we as a platform vendor, we have nothing to do with the E2s and A1s and all those interfaces, but we have a lot to do with O2 interface, which is not really a RIC interface, but that's our focus in ORAN Alliance, to make O2 right, whatever that means. There are always camps, but coincidentally, right now, as we speak, there is an ORAN Alliance General Meeting going on in Osaka, Japan, and hopefully we will get a lot of progress happening in all of these interfaces in that general meeting, including these RIC interfaces.
Yeah, I think one of the major challenges would be that it's pretty new thing, the whole idea about RIC, where networks are able to share data, where a third party is going to use that data to build applications. This is, in my opinion, a big cultural shift as well in the world of telecommunications, and people are not used to this. So as a result, what is really available, what can be literally used by application providers are pretty limited as we speak. So that also means it stops innovation before it starts. So it has to. So these collaboration labs like i14y actually can solve that problem, because this is the place where people can come together and figure out what's really needed to be exposed from the network in order to build applications. So that's one. The other challenge is that the whole Open RAN or radio network in general is a complicated topic, and that's not really something understood by the application developer ecosystem, and they don't need to. They really, but it's our job actually to attract those developers towards Open RAN so that they can think how to build applications on top of Open RAN. Remember, a lot of telecommunication innovation has happened outside the telecom industry. And to give an example was that before iPhone came up with the application ecosystem, nobody really knew how to consume internet on a phone. So we have to understand and acknowledge the fact that innovation sometimes is better done outside the industry, and then the industry imbibes that. And we have many such examples. Who thought that just a resilient internet would give rise to car sharing or taxi sharing applications? So if you, and even though it might sound frivolous from an Open RAN context, but trust me, if we open up the ecosystem to application developers, there can be innovation which we can't think of as telecom engineers. So I believe that's the way forward on how we can make Open RAN more accessible to the larger developer ecosystem should be a critical factor.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of like one of the key points, right? You know, the telecoms industry has tried to engage with the developer industry multiple times over the past. I think you look at GSMA's One API, if you look at Mobile Edge X, you know, the list goes on and on. So we need to make sure that this case is a little bit different. So how do those developers come in and influence the data that they need, or understand what data is present, so that they can develop these innovations with these applications, and obtaining that level of data, whether it's coming from the RIC platform or whether it's coming from the network infrastructure, there may need to be changes to the standards. So the developers need to influence what you guys are doing actively with an ORAN. And also, you know, it's a little bit difficult, as RAN networking data is often viewed as, you know, slightly proprietary, and people like to keep that a little bit confidential, particularly the operators. Do you see that this is changing, and that they're becoming a little bit more open to expose the type of data that they have in order to achieve this level of innovation and bring the ecosystem together? I think, Timo, if I ask you first.
Yeah, so I answer first, and you can of course complement what I say. But it's true, the data is I wouldn't say it's secret, but it has been proprietary, and it's a very sensitive data, that's for sure, and that's the reason it has not been shared very widely earlier, because with that data you can optimize the radio environment, you know, performance and all these things.
Or disrupt it.
Or yes, exactly, yeah. Now, that has to change to some extent, on my opinion, and RIC again plays a big role there. But how to make that happen is not piece of cake. It needs an ecosystem, as we are speaking today, and a lab like i14y lab. But what it really needs within the ecosystem, and this is what Red Hat has been doing and for ages in open source project, is a trust between the partners, so that partners know that if I talk to this person and I share my data and we decide or we agree that, you know, this data can be shared between these partners, which was not the case before, it requires a lot of trust. And as we all know, building the trust between the partners in ecosystem is not an easy thing to do. Losing the trust is a piece of cake, but building the trust is a difficult thing to do and challenging thing to do. But to make this sensitive data available, not for the whole planet, but within the ecosystem, I think that has to happen, and it needs a lot of work and collaboration between all of us and the labs like this, or NTT Docomo or REC Lab, or all of these labs.
Soma, you'd like to add to that?
Maybe just to add one point, and I think it's so important to have that collaboration and establishing that trust, because we are talking of making our applications more, improving them with AI ML. And if you have to train, if you have to have that learning, so unless you have the data set, it's difficult to have that kind of artificial intelligence built in. So it's very important. Completely agree with what Timo said, that the collaboration, establishing that trust, and having the facilitation along with the operators and the vendors and partners together is what would make us successful here.
Absolutely. I mean, trust is the most important, but also I think along with that, it's also how we can facilitate the larger ecosystem. Today, mostly it's a cozy club, and if we have to really go beyond and attract application developers who might be interested in this, who might be trustworthy, if we have to really get into that, then we have to talk the developer's language more often than not. And one of the APIs which the operators had launched some time back, if you go and check the website today, there's just one application developer there. So obviously something went wrong when the operators tried to do it once before. But then there are changes we can see from an application development perspective. So many operators, software companies together, and network equipment providers together form the Kamara project, which is actually driving some of the network API development. I see the next one is around about that. And there I see a lot of developers getting interested in how to use the network, how to use network insights, and how to build more innovative applications around it. I think it can be replicated, but there is also a problem with open developer ecosystem. Is hard to manage. And I remember the days when OpenStack was launched, everybody had an opinion, everybody had a project, and there was the big tent concept, and then everything kind of became a problem before things had to be better governed. So yes, I think the way forward is to build an ecosystem which attracts developers, which provides developers with the right set of tools and sandboxes and testing and test facilities, but at the same time ensuring that there is a level of testing, validation done before an application is allowed to access network. So again, reiterating, the role of such collaborative labs becomes more and more important to pre-test such use cases before it goes into the network.
And trusted partners that you can collaborate
The trusted
with.
partners can collaborate.
Okay, I want to change tact a little bit. There was a really interesting article from Ian Morris from Light Reading, who said that the ecosystem is facing a choice to decide whether to implement xApps for near-time RIC, rApps for non-real-time RIC, or both, with some players like Ericsson stating that they only currently support rApps and maybe xApps in the future, maybe. So the question to the panel, and Shamik, I'd like to start with you actually because of your platform play, but also apps and your overall SI play as well, is that leading to a division in the ecosystem developing RIC today, and how do we avoid the fragmentation that may actually drive? Because I've also heard that certain use cases could be implemented as part of near real time and some as non-real time. How do we drive that to make sure that we're avoiding that level of fragmentation?
Yeah, and that's a hard question, hard problem to solve, because the near real-time RIC is so close to the radio network. As of today, we expect the network equipment providers to come up with a RIC platform, because it might be hard for them to open up all those interfaces at this stage. But as a result, what's happening, there is a bunch of applications which are being built by the network equipment provider, and then it is expected that the application developers are only going to focus on the rApps, which might be a good starting point, but it may not be sustainable. Because it would mean that even we are talking about Open RAN, it is still not very open, because the near real-time RIC is still not accessible to a developer. So I think there is no real answer today to stop this fragmentation. And maybe it's a good idea to keep it a bit fragmented right now. That at least would ensure that an ecosystem is built on the two layers. And then at some point, this can converge. But not doing anything is also a problem, right? So I believe the RApps should be more developer-centric, whereas the xApps can be developer-centric, but it will take time to evolve there.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. One of the other questions I had is, you know, we talk about the RIC and Open RAN in this kind of context in almost like a standalone type of scenario. But if we want to integrate this into brownfield deployments, and we know that those brownfield deployments have implementations like SON, like some of the other private network enterprises have, you know, their own type of implementations for network management as well. Is there a way to integrate RIC into that brownfield deployment and coordinate between the two, Soma?
Yeah, absolutely, David. I think, again, this is very important because most of the networks around the world are brownfield networks. So I think as Nokia, when we are developing a solution, it's very clear that we have to develop a solution that would fit into the brownfield network. And if you take our near real-time RIC that we have, it's pretty much, it can work with any of the networks. It can work in the traditional network. It can work with the O radios, open radios. It can work in a classic or a cloud kind of a network. It can be working for the enterprises or for the CSPs. So I think the solution that we have is pretty much able to work on or fit into a brownfield kind of a network. Also, the other important thing that I could highlight is that, for example, the real-time RIC that we have is able to tap into, I think there was, I think one of you were commenting before that, how do you make data accessible to the xApps? So we are able to pull in the real-time measurements from the network and provide that kind of data to the xApps. We are also able to integrate with the existing management systems. Say NetAct that we have, our RIC can be integrated there. So, and also the other important thing that I could highlight here is that today we are actually validating use cases with one of the tier 1 operator, which is a brownfield network, which has more than 100 cell sites. And we are very successfully testing some of the applications like traffic steering, energy saving applications, which is again in a brownfield kind of a network. So yeah, I think whatever solution we develop should be able to work in a brownfield network. It's anything.
Great. Shamik, I want to come back to you because I think we were talking a bit before about engaging with the developer community and the level of innovation that's going to come there. Now, obviously, the vast majorities of the developers are not going to own an Open RAN test lab or a radio network to be able to validate their applications on. So how do we make sure that we have test beds that are accessible to these developers to come in, to validate, and to actually enter into the ecosystem and become a part of it? And do you see i14y as maybe one of those environments?
Yes, and if you go back a few decades back when the cloud, the whole cloud ecosystem came through, how did the application developers actually get interested in that? It's because, of course, the cloud companies ran a strong outreach program for application developers, and they give access to cloud remotely. Now it's given, but at that point of time, it wasn't so easy. I mean, it wasn't so obvious that you will get access to a platform as a service, and you would be able to build applications on top of it. So the cloud ecosystem has shown that it's possible to build sandboxes and attract developers. The difference is that Open RAN is not cloud, and there is a significant part of it is physical hardware and radio. So the development of sandboxes, I think, is critical. This also means that we also have to bring in a lot of test and measurement companies into the sandboxes so that things can be emulated. Different types of networks, different types of traffic can be emulated from a radio perspective, from a mobile perspective, from a device perspective, so that an application developer can actually simulate different kinds or get a simulated environment to figure out what they need to do as an application provider. So sandboxes are critical, and sandboxes have to be also made available remotely. That's how developers would expect it to work. So labs like i14y and other OTIC labs and other collaboration labs can actually make that happen. Or even the operators, I think, if they are really interested in getting the larger application developer ecosystem involved, then they could set up such sandboxes everywhere. So yes, I think there is no alternative but to have more resilient sandboxes available, both emulated and real, and to attract application developers.
Okay, great. So going on that, we've also heard today that i14y recently ran a Spring Plug Fest. RIC was one of their major work streams there. And I guess the three of you were on stage because you were also part of that level of testing within the Plug Fest as well. So I'd like to understand from each of you, starting with you, Timo, what were the lessons learned that you got out of that Plug Fest? What challenges exist and how are we going to overcome those to get to that level of maturity?
Okay, so I have kind of two different levels of answer. And the first level is that, first of all, we did the Plugfest integration with Juniper RIC. And if I may say so, there was no problems. And it can be explained, and we have the same with the Nokia RIC, because we have certified Juniper RIC, we have certified Nokia RIC called Service Enablement Platform, we have certified Mavenir and somebody else. So it was kind of a no-brainer to do the Juniper RIC integration to Red Hat OpenShift. So, and that was expected. Now, what frustrates me tremendously, and not just me, but many other people, is that the fundamental connectivity is always a problem when you go to run a POC or something. You spend a lot of time to get IP connectivity established. And that was what happened in this case as well. RIC platform integration, no issues, but getting the fundamental connectivity to measurement equipment and all that stuff, that was frustrating. And it's been the case for a number of years. It's always, well, not always, but most of the times it is a case. And that should not be the case. Have the lab environment ready for POC.
So would you say that, like a permanent testbed setup would be a better environment to run these types of
Well, like
tests?
in the context of i14y lab, that would be fantastic if we had a permanent, how would I call it, RIC testbed or RIC environment in this lab.
Right.
We would not need to fiddle with the basic connectivity.
Okay. Soma, Nokia also took part, correct?
Right.
So what would
Yes.
what did you guys take out of the Plugfest?
Right, so a couple of things I could highlight. I think one thing, that challenge that Timo highlighted, really to get this kind of an environment up and running. The simulation part is quite extensive, exhaustive, and I think that's a challenge that I would see. The other thing that I think is kind of a challenge is to really have end-to-end kind of test cases available which can validate everything. So, having that kind of test cases to do the validation is also something that I think a lot of work still needs to be done. And a good learning that we've had is basically that when we see the algorithms on the xApps and the algorithms we have in the RAN inside the G-Node-B, I think we see that those are able to work pretty well together. So that was actually a positive learning from the exercise, that they work pretty well together. So yeah, I think these are some of the takeaways at least I could highlight from our experience in the Plugfest. Yeah.
And Shamik?
Yeah, I mean, yes, they have already covered the key ideas around the Plugfest. As I said, I mean, Plugfest, one thing for sure is that the specification and the APIs and the interfaces, I think is getting much more mature as Plugfests are progressing. So that was one key takeaway. Again, I think the Plugfests have to, we have to, it's the stakeholders of the Plugfest, we need to make things a little more simple and define the process, the outcomes, documenting the outcomes, putting it back into the learnings. I think the dissemination of the understanding other learnings have to be a little more structured. One of the things that we tested was our energy saving app, which I spoke about in the morning, and where we simulated networks using test and measurement equipment, Viavi being one of them, and we could actually generate a lot of different alternatives, a lot of different type of traffic and use cases using test and measurement equipment. And I think that's also an important element that we tend to forget. I mean, a lot of effort goes into real integration of the RAN and the radio and everything, which is great. But emulation can really make things go faster in plugfests. Simulated environments can give a lot more a different color, which perhaps is hard to try in a real environment. So yeah, I'm looking forward to more such plugfests where we try to bring in different test and measurement companies, radio equipment, and then try and see what really needs to be improved from the specification point of view.
Okay, thank you very much. And actually, we had a really interesting presentation yesterday related to doing emulation testing for RIC apps and training up the AI ML based on what could be, data taken from a live network and emulated to be able to train up the models within the lab and comparing that to doing it within a live network scenario. So that was interesting to look at. But just let me wrap up a little bit now. I think, thank you all for taking part in the panel. What I take out of this is that the RIC does have a huge amount of potential in the area of Open RAN for innovation, some of which is already being realized today. But there are still some challenges that we need to work together on. In terms of making sure that the standards are completely refined, that we do have maybe a little bit more of a direction in terms of drive and the market deciding whether it will be non-real time, near real time, or both, or even I think we saw a presentation yesterday where there would be DApps being implemented, but that's for another discussion. We've run out of time on that today. But I think also the importance of labs like i14y to provide test beds, test activities, and sandboxes to allow the developers to come in with the people who they're collaborating and trusting to work with as well is really, really important to make sure that the RIC ecosystem is going to be mature and will not just be another SON, but will be a completely open platform for innovation. So please join me in thanking all of our panelists. Thank you.